In this brief talk, I will try to show you why the pandemic produced a revolution in higher education in Latin America, prompting changes that has been postponed for years. My name is Derry Sanchez, and I have been a teacher and a researcher in Latin America for the last 15 years. Let's start saying that Latin America and the Caribbean is a geopolitical region that includes 26 countries that goes from Mexico to Cape Town. For 2022, its estimated total population is 650 million. Higher education coverage has increased steadily in the region over the past 50 years. Between 2000 and 2010 alone, the gross enrollment rate in higher education went from 21% to 40%. And that's huge. Actually, that's the fastest growth rates in the world. Typically, this should have enhanced labor productivity and economic growth, but that didn't happen in Latin America because where worker productivity remains stagnant. And for that reason, the quality of the academic offer was questioned. As a result, from 2010, the region promoted more control for assuring quality. And this generated significant changes. The highest public and private investment budgets focused on improving the infrastructure. Lower investments were also put towards teacher training and work conditions, curriculum updates, connections with the community, inclusion, and equity. According to Times Higher Education in 2022, the country with the biggest amount of universities considered in the international ranking of quality were Brazil, Chile, Mexico, and Colombia. Although that quality is not accessible for most of the population, as it is not sufficient and is still concentrated in the large cities. The general indicators considered are teaching, which means quality of teachers and also working conditions, quotation used to determine international influence of the university in terms of knowledge production, industry income, international outlook, and research. Since 2013, the market share of private higher education institutions increased from 43% to 55%. Most of the new programs were created by the private sector. This means that education innovation in Latin America is driven by the private sector. This generates concern regarding general access to quality education due to the costs of private education and its concentration in large cities, as I said. The middle classes are overrepresented in the classrooms. The expansion of coverage fails to reach the poorest classes, which on average in the regions make up 33% of population. Free education continues to be a pending goal for the states, which little by little are declaring education as a social good, essential to promote change, to ensure development, although that's not necessarily reflected in the national budget. The investment in education is directly associated with the health of the economy. The greater the fiscal deficit, the lower is the investment. In the case of Latin America and the Caribbean, the fiscal deficit of countries has been increasing in the last 10 years, and the GDP has been reduced, although it showed a recovery in 2021. But if we go back to consider that investment in education focused mainly on infrastructure the last 10 years, it should be noted that between 2013 and 2020, there were no significant changes in technological innovation and digitalization, reforms of educational models, flexibility of curricula, and academic mobility. And during the pandemic, these aspects were critical to make the system work. In the first weeks of the lockdown in 2020, when it was expected that the crisis wouldn't last so long, higher education institutions made impromptu decisions. Actually, they just worked with what they had at hand, launching online student programs for which many were not prepared in advance. As months went by and it became clear for everyone that the crisis wasn't going to pass quickly, institutions began to plan and began to learn from their mistakes and to establish more efficient systems to retain students. Dropout rates clearly increased during pandemic. Economic crisis was the main influencing factor, but also logistical factor caused by isolation, such as the increase of domestic work. That caused for many students, particularly the women, to postpone their education in order to support the home. In the first 2 years of the pandemic, 2020 and 2021, the quality of education decreased. Teachers throughout the region reported a drop in student skills by 2021, mainly due to teachers' lack of digital skills and the poor use of tools and curriculums that weren't prepared for e-learning. So, 2021 was in many cases a year of leveling off. By 2022, however, digitalization became the norm and even made it possible to integrate mixed systems between face-to-face and online systems, which made curricula more flexible and promoted the reform of educational models and academic mobility, which had not been addressed intensively, but now became the key factor to making the system work. This opened up new social niches and made it possible to diversify the academic offer with courses that offer greater flexibility with lower costs. The imposed reality accelerated teachers' training and forced to expand access to digital technologies. Institutions' investment priorities changed. Interinstitutional agreements were fostered, thereby raising new opportunities for students and teachers' mobility. The expansion of the offer from face-to-face to online also opened up opportunities for people outside urban centers who could access more easily to an education that previously required them to leave their places of origin. In conclusion, it could be said that the pandemic, with all its difficulties, leaves a positive balance for higher education in Latin America and the Caribbean, because it imposed digitalization, expanded coverage, and promptly and aggressively promoted innovation. Thanks.